Good evening. Welcome to Sleepy Historian. Tonight you are not standing outside a castle. You are not walking through a grand stone hall lit by banners and torchlight. You are not surrounded by knights or feasts or drama. Instead, you are about to step into something far smaller and far more ordinary. Because the truth is this: most medieval people lived almost their entire lives inside a single room. Not occasionally, not temporarily, but almost always. And that room was not simply a place to rest. It was kitchen, bedroom, workshop, storage space, and shelter, all at once. It was warmth contained. It was wind kept out. It was survival reduced to walls. And if you stay with me tonight, slowly, gently, you will begin to understand what it really felt like to live inside one of those spaces. Not just how it looked, but how it pressed against you, how it smelled at dusk, how the floor cooled under your feet, how the smoke never fully left. Before we begin, let yourself settle wherever you are. If you're lying down, allow your shoulders to soften. If you're sitting, let your breathing slow. There is nowhere to rush tonight. The medieval house will still be waiting. If you find comfort here, if these quiet rooms help you rest, consider returning to Sleepy Historian again. You can subscribe if you wish, or simply come back when the world feels loud and you need something slower. Now, it is late afternoon. You are walking toward a timber house at the edge of a village. It is smaller than you expect. The roof slopes low, thatched thickly, the straw darkened by years of rain and smoke. The walls lean just slightly, not collapsing, not unstable, but not perfectly straight either. There are no wide glass windows, only small openings, covered perhaps in oiled cloth or wooden shutters. And the door is lower than your height. You will have to bend to enter. That detail alone tells you something important. This house was not built for display. It was built for holding heat. The medieval home, especially for ordinary people, was not about comfort as we understand it. It was about containment, containing warmth, containing tools, containing family, containing the winter. You reach the door. It opens inward. And the first thing you notice is not darkness. It is warmth. A soft, uneven warmth that carries with it the scent of wood smoke. The air is thicker inside, not suffocating, but present. You step in. Your eyes take time to adjust. There is no hallway, no corridor guiding you. You are simply inside. One room. The fire sits at the center or slightly off-center, depending on the design. In earlier homes, there is no chimney. The smoke rises upward, gathering near the rafters before slowly escaping through the thatch or a vent in the roof. It does not all leave. Some of it lingers. Always. The ceiling beams are darkened from years of it, and as your vision settles, you begin to see the rest. A table, perhaps, or a board laid across trestles. Benches, a chest against the wall, tools hanging from pegs, bundles of dried herbs, straw in one corner. Nothing is decorative. Everything is useful, and everything shares this one space. There is no privacy here in the way you understand privacy. No separate bedrooms, no closed kitchen, no quiet study, just the room. You might expect chaos, but it is not chaotic. It is arranged, carefully. The hearth defines the center of life. Around it, everything else rotates. Sleeping happens near it. Cooking happens within it. Work happens beside it. Conversations take place around it. Even silence gathers near it. The medieval house is smaller than you imagined, but it is also more deliberate. There is no extra space, because extra space is extra cold, and cold is persistent. It seeps through timber. It presses through stone. It crawls upward from the floor, so the room remains compact, intimate, shared. You can hear the faint crackle of wood settling in flame. Perhaps a pot shifts slightly. Someone exhales. Outside, the light is fading. Inside, the fire becomes the sun. And here is another truth that may surprise you. Darkness was not frightening in the medieval home. It was expected. Night did not feel like a loss, it felt like a narrowing. The house would shrink inward with the light. Shadows would thicken, movements would slow. Candles were expensive. You did not burn them casually. You let the fire do the work. The room grows softer. You are beginning to understand something subtle now. The medieval home was not a retreat from labor. It was the center of labor. Shoes were repaired here. Food was preserved here. Cloth was spun here. Animals sometimes sheltered here. Children grew here. People aged here. And sometimes people did not wake here. Morning did not come for everyone, but the room remained. The fire was relit. Life continued within the same walls. Over the course of tonight's journey, you will feel the floor beneath your feet. You will lie down in a shared bed. You will listen to the wind pressing against timber. You will watch frost form on the inside of stone. You will understand why furniture was minimal, why smoke was tolerated, why warmth was wealth, and why home meant something narrower and perhaps more fragile than it does now. For now, simply remain standing inside this one room. Notice how close the walls feel. Notice how the ceiling lowers the sound of your own breath. Notice how everything, every object has purpose. There are no spare corners, no forgotten storage closets, no unused chairs. Every item must justify its existence by helping someone endure another season. You are not observing poverty, you are observing design shaped by necessity. And necessity has a quiet authority. The fire shifts again. A small spark rises, then disappears into smoke. You are warm enough, but not fully warm. You are sheltered, but not fully separate from the outside world. That balance between protection and exposure defines medieval domestic life, and you are only just beginning to feel it. Let your breathing slow. Again. The door behind you is closed. The evening deepens, and this single room holds everything. We will begin gently. First, by stepping fully inside. The door closes behind you with a soft wooden thud. It is not a dramatic sound, just wood against wood. But it matters, because with that sound, the wind is mostly outside. Not entirely, never entirely, but mostly. You remain standing just inside the threshold for a moment. Your eyes are still adjusting. The air is warmer than outside, yes, but it is layered. Warm near the fire, cooler near the walls, cooler still at your ankles. You can feel that difference without moving. The medieval house is not evenly heated. It is heated in gradients. The hearth is the quiet sun of this interior world. Everything else exists in relation to it. You take a slow step forward. The floor beneath you is firm, but not smooth. Packed earth, slightly uneven. You can feel shallow depressions where many feet have stood in the same places for years. There are no rugs in the modern sense. Perhaps rushes have been scattered recently. Dried grasses layered to absorb spills and soften the ground. But beneath that is soil. Always soil. The fire crackles. You glance upward. There is no tall chimney drawing smoke cleanly away. In many earlier homes, smoke simply rises and lingers before finding its way through thatch or through a small opening in the roof. It hangs above you now in a faint haze, not thick enough to choke, but present enough that you are aware of it. It settles into fabric, into hair, into wood grain. Over years it darkens the rafters to a deep brown black. This is why surviving medieval timber often looks charred. It is not burned. It is seasoned by breath and flame. You move closer to the hearth. There is a low stool nearby, not cushioned, not shaped for luxury, just shaped to hold weight. You lower yourself slowly, and from here at this height, you begin to understand the scale of the room more clearly. It is smaller than it first appeared. The ceiling slopes down at the sides. The beams overhead are thick and slightly irregular. You could reach up and touch them if you stood on that stool. The walls are close. Close enough that sound does not travel far before returning. You hear the small sounds more clearly now. A shift of straw in the corner. The faint movement of someone adjusting their position. A quiet cough. Breathing. There may be animals in the space. In many homes, especially in colder months, a goat or a few chickens were brought inside at night, not out of affection, but out of practicality. Their bodies give off heat. Heat is precious. You might smell them faintly. Not overpowering, just another layer in the air. The house is not filthy. It is not sparkling. It is lived in, which means it carries the weight of use. You notice the walls more carefully now. They are made of timber framing filled with wattle and daub, woven sticks covered in a mixture of mud, clay, straw, perhaps animal dung. When dried, it becomes solid. But it is not airtight. Tiny drafts thread their way through cracks. You feel one brush your cheek. The medieval home is never fully sealed. It negotiates with the weather. It bargains. It slows the wind. It does not defeat it. You extend your hands toward the fire. The warmth touches your skin immediately, but turns slightly and it disappears. Heat here is directional. It reaches forward. It does not spread evenly. You begin to understand why most activities cluster around this place. The fire is not decorative. It is life-sustaining. Food cooks here. Water heats here. Clothing dries here. Light radiates from here. And if the fire goes out in winter, the night stretches long and difficult. You might notice something else now. There are very few objects. A wooden chest against one wall, perhaps two. Chests are important. They hold clothing, tools, sometimes precious items. They double as seating, sometimes even as makeshift tables. A shelf, maybe, with pottery bowls. Each bowl slightly different, handmade, practical. No matching sets. Nothing exists purely for display. If something is carved, it is because carving strengthens or preserves it, or because someone, in a quiet spare moment, allowed their hands a small indulgence. But even that indulgence is modest. You glance toward the doorway again. It is closed, but not tight. A faint sliver of evening blue still shows along one edge. The world outside is cooling quickly. Inside, the fire continues its steady work. This is the hour when the medieval house feels most like itself. Between daylight labor and night sleep. Work has not fully ended, but it has slowed. Tools may still be in hand. Someone may be mending a strap. Someone may be stirring a pot. But the urgency of daylight has softened. You notice how low your voice would need to be here. Anything louder would feel unnecessary. The room encourages restraint, not because of rules, but because space absorbs excess poorly. Too much movement stirs smoke. Too much sound presses against timber. The house prefers steadiness, and over time, so do the people inside it. You look at the ceiling again. You see faint gaps in the thatch above, tiny points where dusk filters through. In heavy rain, some of those points might drip. In winter, frost may form along the interior edges of the roof. The house protects, but imperfectly. Always imperfectly. And yet, it is enough. Enough to sleep, enough to eat, enough to endure. You begin to sense something subtle now. This room is not simply shelter. It is a boundary. Inside, managed hardship. Outside, unmanaged hardship. Outside, unmanaged hardship. The difference matters, even if both are difficult. You lean back slightly on the stool. The wood presses firm against you. No cushion yields. No softness embraces. But you are sitting. You are warmer than outside. The firelight moves across the walls in gentle rhythm. Shadows lengthen, then contract. Faces, if you look at them, are lit from below, softly, unevenly. No one here expects brightness. Brightness is rare and expensive. Instead, there is glow. There is presence. There is survival, arranged around flame. The medieval house does not promise comfort. It promises continuity. As long as the roof holds, as long as the fire burns, as long as the walls stand, you remain there, inside that single room, and you begin to understand something quietly important. This is not a temporary dwelling. This is the center of existence, and nearly everything that matters will happen within these few steps of earth and timber. The evening deepens further. The door remains closed. The fire settles into coals. And you are fully inside now. You remain seated for a while, long enough for your breathing to match the rhythm of the fire, long enough for your eyes to stop searching for brightness. And then, slowly, you stand. Not because anything urgent calls you, but because standing allows you to feel the room differently. The first thing you notice again is the floor. It is easy to overlook. It does not shine. It does not creak dramatically. It does not announce itself. But it is constant, beneath every step, beneath every chair, beneath every sleeping body at night. You shift your weight gently from one foot to the other. The ground gives very slightly, not soft, not muddy, but compacted earth that has known years of pressure. This floor was not poured, it was packed. Layer by layer, earth tamped down until firm, sometimes mixed with lime or clay to harden it further, but always fundamentally soil. In dry weather it is cool and firm. In damp seasons it absorbs what the air brings. Moisture travels upward from the ground beneath the house. There is no barrier, no hidden insulation. The earth below and the earth inside are separated only by pressure and roof. You take a slow step. The sound is dull, not hollow like wood, not sharp like stone, just muted contact. In many homes, especially modest ones, rushes are spread across the floor. Dried grasses, weeds, sometimes mixed with herbs. They serve several purposes. They soften the ground slightly. They absorb spills. They trap bits of dirt. And when they grow stale or damp, they are gathered and replaced. Not daily, not weekly, but often enough to matter. You glance downward. Some rushes are fresher than others. Some are flattened where feet pass repeatedly. There is a faint scent of dried plant material under the smoke. It is not unpleasant, it is simply present. You kneel now, lowering yourself carefully. You reach toward the ground and let your fingers brush the surface. It is cool, cooler than the air. The fire's warmth does not reach here fully. Heat rises. The floor keeps its own temperature. In winter, that cold becomes more pronounced. It creeps upward into boots, into legs. It settles in joints. Standing for long periods becomes an act of endurance. You rise again. You imagine a full day spent in this room. Cooking, stirring, mending, sorting grain, tending to children, adjusting tools, all of it done while standing on this surface. There is no padded relief, no thick carpeting to soften hours, only earth. And yet, over time the body adapts. The soles of feet thicken. Posture shifts subtly. Movements become economical. You do not pace unnecessarily. You do not wander without purpose, because each step carries weight. You notice slight irregularities in the ground, shallow depressions where the stool usually rests, a darker patch near the hearth where embers may have fallen and been stamped out, perhaps a faint groove leading toward the door, worn by years of exit and return. The floor records life quietly. It does not preserve it in writing, but it remembers pressure. You walk toward one corner of the room. It is cooler here, further from the fire. The rushes are thinner. Perhaps this is where tools are kept, or where a chest rests. The air feels different at the edges, less stirred. You crouch again, pressing your palm more firmly into the ground. You can feel faint unevenness beneath the surface, not uncomfortable, just honest. This is not a constructed perfection. It is maintained functionality, and maintenance is constant. Sweeping happens regularly. A simple broom of twigs tied together is drawn across the floor. Dirt is gathered, ashes removed, spilled grain is collected carefully. Nothing is wasted. When rushes become too damp or too soiled, they are replaced. But replacement takes effort, so they are turned first, shaken outside if weather allows, reset, again and again. The floor demands attention, not because it is delicate, but because it is fundamental. If it becomes too damp, the room becomes colder. If it becomes too dirty, pests are encouraged. Not dramatically, not in swarms, but gradually. And gradual problems are the kind that medieval life is always negotiating. You stand once more. Your feet feel the difference between the center of the room and the edges, between warmth and coolness, between activity and stillness. The floor teaches you something subtle about medieval living. Comfort is not layered beneath you. It is created through repetition, through sweeping, through rearranging, through endurance. You notice now how low the furniture sits, stools, benches, all close to the ground. When seated, your feet rest fully on this earth. When rising, you push against it directly. There is no separation. You are always in contact with the surface that holds the house steady, and during winter, that contact becomes sharper. The earth chills deeply. Even with fire burning, the lower air remains cool. You might tuck your feet beneath you while sitting. You might wrap wool around your ankles, but the cold reminds you where you are, above soil, under thatch, between seasons. You walk slowly across the room again, each step measured, each shift of weight quiet. The house does not echo. It absorbs. The packed earth swallows the sound of movement, which is why voices can remain low, why nights feel hushed, why sleep, when it comes, is not interrupted by creaking boards. The floor holds silence well. You pause near the hearth again. Here, the ground is drier, warmer. Ash may have been scattered and swept here repeatedly. The earth has been tempered by flame. It feels firmer, almost baked. And this small circle of altered ground marks the center of life. You begin to understand that the medieval floor is not a background feature. It is an active participant. It shapes posture. It shapes movement. It shapes how long someone can stand before needing to sit. It shapes how warmth travels or fails to travel. You imagine lying down here briefly just to feel it. It would not be soft. It would not be welcome you, but it would hold you, steady, unmoving, as it has held generations before. The fire shifts behind you. A small ember rolls outward, then dims. Someone reaches quietly to push it back with a stick. The floor remains patient beneath it all, uncomplaining, unchanging. It asks only to be maintained, to be kept dry, to be swept, to be respected, and in return, it supports everything. You stand once more in the center of the room, your feet planted firmly in packed earth, the fire warming one side of you, the wall cooling the other. Above you, smoke drifts slowly toward dark beams. Below you, soil rests in quiet endurance. The medieval home is not layered with comfort from the ground up. It is anchored to reality from the ground up. It is anchored to reality from the ground up, and you are standing directly upon it. You remain standing in the center of the room. The fire is still burning, but lower now. Its flames no longer leap. They fold inward. They settle into steady orange movement. And with that change, the room changes too. Light in a medieval home is not fixed. It breathes. It grows and shrinks with the fire. It shifts when someone moves. It disappears quickly when the fuel thins. You turn slowly and look toward the wall where a small opening has been cut. A window, if it can be called that. It is narrow, perhaps no wider than your forearm, perhaps covered with oiled cloth stretched across a wooden frame. In wealthier homes, there may be small panes of glass. But here, glass is rare. Glass is fragile. Glass is expensive. Most homes rely on openings that can be shuttered tight at night. During the day, this small aperture allows pale light to enter. But now, at dusk, it admits almost nothing. The blue outside has dimmed. The world beyond the wall is fading into shadow. You walk toward the opening. The floor cools slightly beneath your feet as you move away from the hearth. You pause near the window and look outward. There is no street lamp, no distant glow, only the soft gradient of evening, perhaps the outline of another roof, perhaps the faint movement of smoke rising elsewhere. And then, Slowly, even that disappears. You close the wooden shutter. The sound is simple, a quiet press of wood against wood, and with that small act, the house becomes more inward. The fire is now the only light. You turn back toward it. The room appears smaller, not physically, but perceptually. Shadows stretch along the walls. The beams overhead fade into darkness beyond the reach of flame. The corners of the room become uncertain, not frightening, just indistinct. This is the quality of medieval night. It is not dramatic. It is not theatrical. It is a narrowing of vision. You return to your stool. You sit again. From here, the firelight flickers across your hands. The backs of your fingers glow briefly, then dim as flames shift. If someone moves across the room, their figure passes through alternating bands of brightness and shadow. Light here is uneven, directional. It does not illuminate everything equally, which means that much of the room is always partially unseen. And yet, no one stumbles, no one panics. Because the layout is known. Every chest, every bench, every peg in the wall, all memorized through repetition. You realize something quietly important. Darkness was not an event. It was routine. People did not experience night as sudden loss. They expected it. They structured their days around it. Candles exist, yes. Tallow candles made from animal fat. They burn with a faint, slightly smoky scent. But they are not used carelessly. Wax candles, cleaner, brighter, are even more costly. Reserved for churches or wealthier households. So most evenings depend on the hearth. You watch the fire more closely now. Its light reaches perhaps halfway across the room. Beyond that, objects blur. A chest becomes a darker shape against a dark wall. A hanging tool glints briefly if angled just right. But details soften, edges fade, and with that fading, activity slows. There is little reason to begin complex tasks. Sewing becomes difficult. Fine repairs strain the eyes. Reading, for the rare few who can, requires precious candlelight, so the house shifts into simpler rhythms. Conversation, eating, mending by feel rather than sight. You notice how your own breathing seems louder in the dimness, not because it has changed, but because the world has grown quieter. Light influences sound. When you see less, you listen more. You hear the subtle movement of someone adjusting straw bedding in the corner. You hear the faint pop of sap within burning wood. You hear the wind outside brushing against thatch. The fire dips slightly lower. Someone rises quietly to add another piece of wood. The momentary brightness expands the room again. Shadows retreat. Faces reappear more clearly. Then, as the new log catches and settles, the light steadies once more. This cycle repeats throughout the evening. Brightness, softening, brightness, softening. The house breathes with flame. You glance upward. Near the rafters, smoke lingers in a faint gray layer. In daylight, it would be more visible. Now it merges with darkness. You can smell it gently. It does not overwhelm. It simply remains. Over years, lungs adapt. Eyes adapt. Skin adapts. Medieval life did not eliminate discomfort. It absorbed it. You lean slightly forward, watching the coals shift. The floor near the hearth glows faintly in reflection. Further away, the earth absorbs light entirely. You stretch your hand outward toward the edge of the fire's reach. At a certain distance, your skin no longer warms. The air feels cooler. Beyond that line, the room belongs to night. You understand now that medieval interiors were not brightly lit spaces filled with flickering torches. They were dim, consistently dim, and that dimness shaped behavior. It shaped mood. It shaped memory. Details blur in low light, which means small imperfections disappear, which means the room, in some quiet way, feels gentler. You are not confronted with sharp edges or glaring contrasts. Everything softens into amber and shadow. You feel your eyelids grow heavier. This is natural. Firelight encourages it. The human body responds to low illumination by slowing. by preparing for rest. The medieval house does not fight that instinct, it supports it. There is no electric interruption, no artificial brightness to prolong wakefulness. Night arrives, and with it, the narrowing of attention. You look once more toward the closed shutter. Behind it, the world is fully dark now. Inside, the fire holds a small circle of glow. Everything that matters is within that circle. Food has been eaten. Tools are at rest. Voices soften further. The house, which felt modest in daylight, now feels protective. Contained, intimate, not because it is luxurious, but because it holds light against the vast dark outside. You sit still. The shadows move gently across the walls. Your breathing slows. The floor beneath you remains cool. The smoke above you remains faint. The fire before you continues its patient work, and you begin to understand something subtle and steady. Darkness was not the enemy of medieval homes. It was the boundary that made the fire meaningful. The fire has burned lower. Not out, just quieter. Its light now sits closer to the ground, more ember than flame. The room has narrowed again. Work has ended. Movement has slowed, and attention turns gradually toward sleep. But sleep here does not mean retreating to separate rooms. It does not mean closing a private door. It does not mean solitude. You remain in the same space, the same walls, the same floor. Only the purpose of the room shifts. Someone rises and begins to prepare the bedding. In many modest medieval homes, the bed is not a permanent structure dominating the space. It may be a simple wooden frame against the wall, or ropes stretched tightly between posts, a rope bed, pulled firm to support weight. In poorer households, bedding may be laid directly on the floor atop thicker layers of straw. Tonight you move toward the bed frame near the hearth, not too close. Too much heat would be uncomfortable, but not too far. Too much cold would be worse. The mattress, if it can be called that, is a large tick, a fabric sack filled with straw, dried grasses, sometimes wool scraps if available. It is not uniform. You press your hand into it. It shifts, it rustles. It does not spring back. It simply settles around pressure. You lift one edge slightly. The scent is dry, faintly grassy, layered with smoke. Blankets are folded nearby. Wool, heavy and coarse, not soft in the modern sense, but warm, very warm. Wool traps heat, and heat is everything. There may be linen sheets, lighter, smoother, but these are not always plentiful. You begin to understand something quietly important. Beds in medieval homes are not symbols of luxury. They are tools of survival. Multiple people will share this space, not out of sentiment, but out of necessity. Bodies generate warmth, and in a room that cools quickly once the fire lowers, shared warmth becomes essential. You remove outer garments carefully. Clothing is not tossed aside casually. Each piece has value. Boots are placed near the bed. A cloak may remain draped close at hand in case of night chill. You lie down slowly. The straw beneath you shifts and compresses. You can feel unevenness, small ridges, soft dips. It is not perfectly flat, but after long labor, perfection is not required. You pull a wool blanket over your body. It is heavy, substantial. The weight presses gently against your shoulders. Another person lies beside you. You feel the mattress dip slightly with their movement. There is no embarrassment here, no apology for closeness. This is normal. Children may sleep nearby, perhaps on a smaller pallet, perhaps tucked against the same frame. Privacy as you know it does not exist, but neither does isolation. The room remains visible. The hearth glows faintly. Shadows flicker along the ceiling. You turn slightly onto your side. The straw rustles again. You can hear the breathing of others. Slow, rhythmic. Someone coughs once. The air is cooler now. You can see your breath faintly if you exhale toward the dim glow of embers. You pull the blanket higher. The wool scratches slightly at your chin, but warmth gathers beneath it. You begin to feel the layered strategy of medieval sleep. Clothing is not fully removed. You may sleep in a linen shift or simple night garment, sometimes even in outer layers during colder months. Blankets are layered, sometimes furs if available. In wealthier homes, bed curtains may surround the frame, thick fabric hung from above to trap heat. In this modest room, there are no curtains, only shared bodies. You shift again. Your foot brushes against another's ankle. It is not awkward. It is expected. Heat passes between you. Slowly, you notice how sound carries differently now that you are lying down. The room feels taller from this angle. The rafters seem further away, the smoke layer less visible. The floor no longer presses against your feet. Instead, the mattress absorbs your weight unevenly. The fire cracks softly. A log settles inward. Sparks rise briefly, then fade. If the fire dies too far during the night, someone may wake to stir it. Not always. Sometimes it is allowed to burn low until morning. You feel the gradual cooling of air above the blanket, warm beneath, cool at the nose. This contrast becomes familiar. Comfort is not full warmth. It is managed warmth. You listen to the wind outside. It presses gently against the thatch. The walls hold steady. A faint draft slips through somewhere unseen. You tuck your shoulder deeper into the blanket. The bed creaks slightly as someone turns. The ropes beneath the mattress, if this is a rope bed, hold tension. Occasionally they must be tightened. If they loosen too much, the bed sags. The phrase, "sleep tight," will one day come from this very act. Pulling ropes firm before lying down. You close your eyes. Darkness deepens further. The last glow of ember is small now, but still visible through half-lidded sight. You understand something subtle and steady. Sleep here is communal. Not romanticized, not sentimental, but practical. To sleep alone in winter would be colder, harder, more dangerous. To share space is to share heat, to share breath, to share endurance. You shift slightly closer to the warmth beside you. Your body relaxes. Muscles soften. The long day settles into the straw. The floor remains firm beneath the bed. The walls remain imperfect. The roof remains watchful against night. But within this small cluster of blankets and breath, warmth accumulates. And warmth, in this house, is the closest thing to luxury. You are lying still now. The wool blanket rests heavily across your shoulders. The straw mattress has shifted and settled around your weight. Warmth gathers slowly beneath the layered fabric and shared breath. But above the blanket the air is cooler, and in that cooler air, sound becomes more noticeable. The fire has lowered to a bed of glowing embers. Its brightness no longer fills the room. It pulses faintly, soft orange light, steady but restrained, and in that dimness you begin to hear the house more clearly. During the day, noise is absorbed by movement, by voices, by tasks. At night, when bodies are still, the structure speaks. A timber beam contracts as the temperature drops. A faint dry tick, not loud, just enough to remind you that wood is alive to change. The thatch above shifts slightly as wind brushes across it, a low rustle, almost like distant breathing. You inhale slowly. You can smell smoke faintly in the air. It has settled lower now that the fire burns smaller, not thick, just present. A part of the room's identity. Someone beside you exhales deeply and turns. The mattress dips. Straw whispers against fabric. You feel the shift of weight, then stillness again. Outside, the wind presses gently against the walls. You do not hear it as a howl. There are no dramatic gusts tonight, just steady contact. The house does not fully block it. It negotiates. It allows some of that movement to translate through timber and daub. You hear a faint tapping, perhaps a loose twig brushing the exterior, or perhaps only thatch adjusting itself. The sounds are ambiguous, and that ambiguity is normal. You do not investigate every noise. You grow accustomed to them. If animals are sheltered inside tonight, you may hear the subtle rustle of feathers, A quiet shift of hooves against packed earth, a soft exhale. Their presence adds warmth, and with warmth comes sound. A small cough from across the room, not sharp, just a clearing of throat in smoky air. It passes quickly. You feel your own breath cloud briefly in the cooler space near your face. You pull the blanket slightly higher. The wool brushes your cheek. It is coarse but familiar. The embers settle again. A faint crack as a piece of wood collapses inward. Tiny sparks lift and fade. The light flickers against the ceiling beams, revealing their darkened surfaces. Then dimness returns. You become aware of the rhythm of shared breathing. It overlaps. One inhale begins before another finishes. A quiet, layered pattern. You begin to match your breath to it. Not intentionally, just naturally. Night inside a medieval home is not silent, but it is steady, predictable. The floor remains firm beneath the bed. You cannot see it now, but you remember its coolness, its solidity. The walls remain imperfect. You cannot see the faint cracks in the daub, but you know they are there, and through them small draughts continue their slow passage. You feel one brush the back of your hand where it has slipped outside the blanket. You draw it inward. The cold is not sharp, just persistent. This is how medieval discomfort often presents itself, not as sudden pain, but as gradual pressure, a reminder. The wind shifts slightly outside. The tapping sound changes direction. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is only thatch resettling. The house creaks once more, a soft hollow sound from somewhere near the roof. Timber adjusting to cooler air. You imagine the beams expanding again when morning warmth returns. This cycle happens daily. Expansion, contraction. The house breathes with temperature. You remain still, eyes closed, listening. You realize that darkness here is complete. There is no stray glow from beyond the walls, no distant light seeping through cracks, only the embers' faint pulse. When they dim further, the room will be almost entirely black. And yet this is not alarming. You know the space. You could navigate it by memory if needed. The chest is 3 steps from the bed. The hearth slightly to the left, the door near the far wall, everything fixed in place by repetition. Another soft movement beside you. A child perhaps adjusting position. A small murmur, then quiet again. You sense how closely bodies are arranged in this room, not layered upon one another, but near enough that warmth circulates, near enough that sound carries easily. Privacy dissolves at night, but so does isolation. If someone were to stir suddenly, if someone were to rise quietly, the room would notice, not through sight, but through sound. The embers dim further. The orange glow now faint, barely illuminating the hearthstones. Shadows dissolve into complete darkness. You cannot see the rafters anymore, only the faintest suggestion of shape. Your hearing sharpens further in response. You detect the small rhythmic scratch of something, perhaps a mouse within the wall. Not alarming, merely another inhabitant of timber and straw. You breathe slowly, inhale, exhale. The air feels cooler at each breath. The room's warmth is condensed beneath blankets and around bodies. Above that layer, night asserts itself. You feel your muscles relax more deeply now. The initial alertness of listening fades. The sounds become background. The creaks no longer prompt awareness. They blend into a steady pattern. The wind presses, the thatch adjusts. The timber settles. Breathing continues. And somewhere between those quiet repetitions, you begin to drift. Not fully asleep yet, but softened, suspended between awareness and rest. This is the true soundscape of a medieval home at night. Not silence, not chaos, but structure and subtle motion. Wood responding to cold, air negotiating with walls, bodies sharing warmth. You understand something quietly significant. The house is not inert. It participates. It expands and contracts. It absorbs and releases. It holds and it yields. And you, lying within it, are part of that pattern. Your breath joins the rhythm. Your warmth contributes to the shared air. Your stillness allows the structure's small sounds to surface. The night stretches ahead, long, uninterrupted. No clock marks the hour. No mechanical ticking divides the darkness. Only gradual cooling, only layered breathing, only the steady endurance of timber walls holding against wind. You settle deeper into the straw. The wool blanket weighs comfortably across you. The last ember dims, and the house continues its quiet conversation with the night. At some point in the night, without announcement, the embers fade completely. Darkness becomes whole. The house rests in full shadow. And then, gradually, without ceremony, morning begins. Not with brightness, not with alarm, but with temperature. The air grows slightly colder just before dawn. You feel it first at your face. The tip of your nose cools. Your breath feels sharper as you inhale. You stir, not fully awake, just aware. Beside you, someone shifts under wool. The straw mattress rustles faintly. A quiet murmur passes and fades. There is no clock to consult. No defined hour. Only the subtle sense that night has thinned. You open your eyes. At first you see nothing. Then, slowly, the faintest gray enters the room. Not through the hearth, but through the small shuttered window. A thin seam of light pressing at the edges. Someone rises carefully from the bed. The ropes creak softly. A blanket slips aside. Cool air rushes briefly into the warm pocket beneath the covers. You feel it immediately. The absence of shared heat. You draw the blanket closer. But you know you will rise soon too, because morning inside a medieval home does not happen elsewhere. It happens here. In the same room. The same floor. The same walls. The person who rose first moves quietly across the packed earth. Bare feet or simple shoes make almost no sound. They kneel at the hearth. You hear the faint scrape of ash being shifted. A small breath blown gently against gray coals. A pause. Another breath. Then a soft, hopeful crackle. Fire returning is not dramatic. It is coaxed, encouraged. The first faint orange glow appears. Then a thin ribbon of smoke curls upward. The house inhales again. You sit up slowly. The straw beneath you shifts. You feel the coolness where your body was not resting. The mattress has retained some warmth beneath you. But around the edges, the night lingers. You swing your feet down. They meet the earth floor. It is colder now than when you lay down. Morning has not yet warmed it. The contact sharpens your senses. You stand carefully. The room appears larger again, in gray dawn light. The rafters become visible. The chests take shape. The outlines of tools sharpen. This is the daily transformation, from sleeping chamber to working space, without moving walls, without changing rooms. The bed is not left as it is. Blankets are folded, not meticulously arranged, but gathered, stacked, set aside to clear the space. The mattress may remain on its frame, or be adjusted. Children rise more slowly, small figures emerging from beneath wool, eyes half open. The hearth crackles more confidently now. A small flame steadies, light expands outward from it. Not as bright as midday, but sufficient. You move toward the chest where your clothing rests. You dress without privacy, because there is none, and because it is unnecessary. Life here is communal. Function replaces modesty. The floor cools your feet until the fire strengthens. You feel the gradient again. Warmth near the hearth, cold near the walls. The house resumes its daily pattern. A pot is set above flame. Water warms slowly. The smell of smoke deepens as fresh wood catches. A faint scent of damp wool rises as blankets are shaken briefly. Someone opens the shutter. The wooden latch lifts with a quiet click. Morning light spills into the room, pale and thin at first, but steady. You glance toward the doorway. It remains closed for now. The outside air is colder than inside. There is no reason to invite it prematurely. The same room that held sleep now holds preparation. You feel how quickly purpose shifts. The bench that supported a folded blanket becomes seating for morning tasks. The chest that rested quietly in shadow becomes storage, accessed repeatedly. The hearth that glowed softly in darkness now demands attention and fuel. Nothing changes physically, and yet everything changes functionally. This is how medieval homes operate. They are not divided by walls. They are divided by time. You move across the floor again. The rushes feel slightly damp in places. They will be turned later. Swept, perhaps. The broom of bound twigs rests in its usual place. You pick it up. You begin to sweep gently, not because the floor is visibly filthy, but because yesterday's ash and bits of straw must be reset. Sweeping is part of waking. The motion is rhythmic. Forward, back, forward, back. Dust gathers lightly. Ash is guided toward the hearth. The floor reveals its familiar unevenness again as you move. The house brightens incrementally. Light from the window meets firelight in the center. Shadows shorten. The ceiling beams no longer vanish into darkness. Outside, faint village sounds begin. A distant animal call. A door opening somewhere else. But inside this house, everything begins here. You realize something subtle and steady. There is no separation between private rest and public life. The same space holds both, which means there is continuity, no dramatic transition, no escape from yesterday's environment. Just repetition. The fire warms the room slowly. Your feet grow less cold. The air loses its sharpness. Breakfast, simple and practical, will soon be prepared, and after that, the door will open. Cold air will enter briefly as someone steps outside, but for now, you remain inside the same walls that held the night. You feel the endurance of that continuity. There is comfort in it. Not soft comfort, but structural comfort. The predictability of space. You know where everything rests. You know where warmth gathers. You know where cold lingers. The house has not changed overnight. It does not reinvent itself. It persists. Morning does not transform it into something new. It simply activates it again. You stand near the hearth once more. The fire strengthens. The floor warms slightly beneath your feet. Light spreads gradually across packed earth and timber walls. The night shadows withdraw fully, and you understand, in a quiet way, that medieval life did not move between separate environments. It revolved inside one. This room has held sleep. Now it holds movement. Soon it will hold work. And by evening, it will narrow again into firelight. The cycle does not hurry. It repeats. And you are standing at its beginning once more. You step back from the hearth and allow your eyes to wander along the walls. They are not polished. They do not gleam. They are timber, wattle, and daub. Thick posts of oak or ash frame the room. Between them, a lattice of woven sticks, wattle, has been pressed with mud, clay, straw, sometimes even animal dung, creating daub. The surface is uneven. Your fingers, if you were to trace them slowly, would follow slight ridges and hollows. The walls are alive in a quiet way, not in movement, but in interaction. They respond to weather. They breathe. Cold air outside presses against them. Moisture is absorbed. Heat from the fire radiates toward them. They accept some warmth, but not all. You notice subtle gradients along their surface. Near the hearth, the clay has darkened over years of smoke. Further away, it remains paler, cooler to the touch. Even in a single room, temperature shifts gradually. A cold draft slips through a tiny gap in the upper beam. You feel it brush your neck. It is not alarming, just present. The house is porous. It negotiates with the outside rather than defying it. This is important to understand. You cannot fully insulate here. Walls are not barriers. They are semi-permeable shields. The house is always negotiating with the elements. You move slowly along the wall, hand brushing lightly. The texture is coarse. Some straw protrudes. Some clay has cracked in tiny patterns. You notice small repairs. Mud applied in a quiet hand. Perhaps someone patched this yesterday. Perhaps years ago. The walls bear witness to care and time. Above you, Beams stretch across the ceiling, thick, darkened by smoke and age. Knots and imperfections mark their surfaces. They creak faintly as the air cools or warms. The house is in constant, subtle motion. Not enough to alarm, just enough to remind you that it is alive in its way. If you lean close to the wall, you may smell it. Earthy clay, dried straw, faint smoke from the hearth, a scent that is not fragrant, but not unpleasant. It is the smell of endurance. The wall separates inside from outside. It mediates warmth and cold. It mediates air. It mediates life. Some walls may have plaster applied for a smoother finish, particularly in wealthier households. Here in this modest home, the daub remains mostly bare. The irregularities serve a quiet purpose. They catch smoke and soften its movement. They trap dust slowly descending from rafters. They provide surfaces for small hooks or pegs, for tools, for hanging clothing. Even the smallest imperfection is functional. The walls are not decorative. They are pragmatic. They support daily life, and yet they are intimate. The firelight flickers across their surface. Shadows dance gently in the hollows of wattle and daub. Each ridge, each depression, receives light differently. You notice the variation and let it settle in. Movement through the room becomes dictated in part by the walls. You do not stand too close to the hearth near the wall lest your sleeve brush it. You do not rest too near the cold side lest you lose warmth. You navigate space with awareness of these surfaces. You step near a corner. Here, timber posts converge. They are smoother, heavier. They bear the weight of roof and upper structure. You can feel the coolness of clay in contrast with the firmer wood. You realize that the house communicates constantly, subtly. It tells you where warmth will accumulate, where cold will linger, where draft may enter, where moisture will gather after rain. It is a quiet map of endurance. You imagine the walls in winter, rain beating the roof, cold pressing against the exterior, the fire low for the night. The daub cools. You might feel moisture forming in small beads along uneven surfaces. Perhaps frost creeps along lower edges near the floor. The walls accept this passively. They do not protect you fully, but they moderate it, and because of that the fire's heat becomes precious. You notice that these walls demand patience. Movement is deliberate. Hands are careful. Attention is gentle. No sudden motions. No rushing along the surfaces. Even leaning against them requires care. The house rewards quiet vigilance. You trace your hand along the wattle. Some sticks protrude. They catch slightly on your sleeve. You pause. The texture is informative. It tells you that repairs may be needed, that age progresses, that care has been applied previously and will be applied again. Above, the beams creak slightly, a soft, hollow sound, almost musical in its predictability. The walls, the floor, the roof, all in conversation, not words, not voices, but subtle signals. You begin to understand the rhythm of living here. The house breathes. It sways imperceptibly. It responds to temperature and weight. It absorbs your movements, your presence, your warmth. It remembers patterns, and in return, you adjust your own movements. You do not need instruction. You learn simply by inhabiting it. You step back. From this distance, the room feels both smaller and larger simultaneously. The walls are close enough to hold warmth, but distant enough to allow circulation of air. The house exists in a balance of comfort and exposure. It holds you, but it does not shield completely, and that is precisely the way medieval life was arranged. The walls provide support, moderation, and subtle feedback, not luxury, not perfection, but survival. You lift your gaze slowly toward the ceiling. The beams above are thick, dark, and irregular. They stretch across the room, supporting the roof. The roof itself is hidden mostly from view, but you can sense it. Thatch pressed tightly in layers, perhaps covered with turf. The outside world presses down on it: rain, wind, frost, occasional snow, and inside, smoke rises gently, curling toward the apex. You watch it twist and settle in slow, silent patterns. The ceiling is not a passive boundary. It is active in ways that are subtle but persistent. Smoke collects in the cooler upper layers first, then gradually drifts through openings, gaps, and spaces between beams. You notice how the smoke does not vanish immediately. It hangs. It lingers. It softens the air. It reminds you to adjust your breath. Too deep, too fast, and you taste it more strongly. You breathe slowly, letting it move with you. Some of it deposits on beams over time. Dark stains mark the passage of decades. The ceiling remembers everything. Your eyes, now accustomed to low light, pick out small irregularities, knots in beams, cracks in the wood, small notches where hooks once held utensils or simple decorations. Occasionally birds or insects may nest in crevices. The roof is porous, but it shields nevertheless. Rainwater never reaches the fire directly. Wind gusts enter faintly, making smoke twist more sharply in some corners. You can feel this in the coolness at the ceiling line. Even without stepping on a stool, you sense the cold air settling there. The upper air is slower to warm than the floor. The temperature gradient is subtle but constant. You realize that living here requires awareness not just of the floor, the walls, or the hearth, but of the air above you. The house operates in layers. Heat accumulates low, near fire and bodies. Cold presses high. Smoke gathers upward, and everything interacts quietly. You step carefully back from the hearth, letting your eyes follow the ceiling across the room. Beams intersect at right angles, some marked with age, some with fresh cuts from repairs. The house is not perfectly straight. It does not aspire to be. It is functional first. It is a record second. A witness always. The movement of smoke is steady but variable. Sometimes it drifts lazily. Sometimes a small shift in wind outside causes it to curl sharply. You imagine life at night here, when embers are low. Smoke would hover in the dim upper reaches, forming a subtle haze. It softens light and muffles sound slightly. It makes movement quieter, slower, more deliberate. You feel your own breathing merge with that rhythm, inhaling, exhaling. The ceiling above holds it all. You notice the shadows it casts, twisting along the beams, shifting slowly as embers shift. Not dramatic, not disorienting, just persistent, subtle, slow. The ceiling is part of the room's endurance. It mediates temperature. It mediates temperature. It mediates smoke. It mediates perception. It is never separate from life in the house. You could touch a beam if you wished. Rough, darkened by smoke, slightly splintered. You would feel decades of heat, cold, and moisture absorbed into the wood. The roof presses down silently. It bears weight quietly but insistently. You imagine winter nights when frost presses against the thatch. Snow lays heavy on the ridge. The beams absorb the subtle shift. The smoke from hearth fire rises steadily. It meets the cold. It swirls gently, and through that, life continues below. Every sound in the room, a cough, a shift of straw, a foot brushing the floor, rises toward the ceiling and is softened, absorbed, diffused. The beams are witnesses. The roof is witness. The smoke is witness. They moderate experience, keeping extremes at bay. You lean slightly, adjusting a wool blanket or shifting the mattress. Even this movement is registered, not loudly, not alarmingly, but as a subtle contribution to the slow, quiet rhythm. The house is a living system, not in a modern sense, not through mechanics, through patience, endurance, and careful balance. The roof collects cold and pressure. The smoke rises and softens light and sound. The beams stretch silently to hold weight, and you, lying beneath it, inhabit all these layers. This is the way medieval people understand their homes. Not as objects to decorate, not as zones to separate rooms, but as systems to inhabit carefully, to negotiate with, rather than conquer. You feel the quiet necessity of these ceilings. Without them, the fire's warmth would escape more rapidly. Without the beams, smoke would drift unpredictably. Without the roof's layered thatch, the house would not shield you from rain or snow. It is endurance made tangible. And you notice, too, how these ceilings shape perception. The room feels taller at night when embers are low. It feels smaller in daylight when tasks are underway. It reacts slowly, almost imperceptibly, but always. You close your eyes briefly, breathing in sync with the steady curl of smoke above you, listening to the soft, faint creak of beams as temperature shifts, feeling the cold air pressed high, warmth pressed low. All of it converging in a quiet, balanced tension, and in this awareness you understand something subtle. Medieval homes were not static. They were living environments. Rooms, walls, floors, and ceilings all participated in a careful negotiation between human need and the elements, and for those who inhabit them, survival was never passive. It required attention, patience, and quiet endurance. Even the ceiling, high above, is part of that slow work. It watches, it absorbs, it mediates, and it waits. You turn your attention now to the edges of the room. The walls have held warmth and smoke. The ceiling has absorbed heat and tension. Now the openings invite the outside in. The window is small, narrow, just wide enough to let light through, or air, but not enough to fully illuminate the room. A wooden shutter closes it at night. Sometimes it is propped open slightly in the day, allowing a thin line of sunlight to enter. Even now, early morning light seeps faintly through cracks. You step closer, touch the wood. It is cool from the night air pressing against it. You lift the shutter slightly. A sliver of pale dawn enters, not bright, not urgent, just enough to reveal textures, the uneven daub, the dark timber, the packed earth floor. Outside the world is quiet. Perhaps the wind brushes across the thatch. Perhaps the smoke from neighboring chimneys rises in soft spirals. The village beyond is calm, still sleeping. No abrupt noises, no sudden events. Just the slow, measured rhythm of early life. Doors like windows are modest, a simple plank held by a latch, sometimes reinforced with iron bands if the household is wealthier. Opening it introduces cold air, sharp and noticeable. You do so carefully, as the air shift impacts warmth throughout the room. You feel the draft sweep across the floor. It moves like water, curling around objects, brushing against ankles, shifting dust and ash in imperceptible streams. You step back inside, the cold retreating slightly as the fire begins to assert itself again. Windows and doors are not just entryways. They are mediators. They balance inside and outside. They allow life to breathe but not fully escape. At this hour, the room is a theater of slow perception. Light shifts gradually. Cold gathers where shadows linger. Heat lingers near the fire and around bodies. You notice the way sound carries differently near openings. A door opened even slightly amplifies distant noises, the faint caw of a bird outside, the rustle of wind through thatch, the distant lowing of a cow. All of these are softened, diffused by walls, smoke, and space. You take a breath. You feel the air moving past your face. It carries the faint scent of smoke, damp earth, and early morning chill. Inside, the house remains constant. Outside, the world changes slowly, measured by light, wind, and temperature. You imagine activity beginning elsewhere in the village. Children rising in other homes. Animals being fed. Bread being prepared. But here, inside, the pace is unhurried. The house holds its own rhythm. Every object in the room responds subtly. The door sways slightly on its hinges as air moves. The shutter vibrates faintly. Dust settles differently with each opening. Even the straw on the mattress shifts imperceptibly. The room is never inert. It breathes slowly, quietly, and you begin to understand the value of these thresholds. Windows, doors, and shutters are not just practical. They teach endurance. They demand awareness. A small movement outside impacts the interior subtly but persistently. Life and survival are negotiated at these edges. You pause at the door, place a hand on the rough plank, feel the cold radiating from outside. You listen. The room hums quietly with the residual warmth of fire and human presence. Outside, the wind carries imperceptible threats, chill, damp, small discomforts. The house absorbs these, it mediates them, it does not eliminate them. You step back, the window shutter closes gently, the door remains shut. Inside, warmth is preserved. The room holds a quiet balance. Everything here is measured, moderated, deliberate. The edges of the house are essential to understanding medieval life. They remind you that comfort is relative, that warmth is precious, that air, sound, and light are part of survival strategy. Even a modest room achieves this through careful design, observation, and experience. You stand quietly, feeling the air move in measured currents. The fire glows steadily. The straw mattress retains warmth. The walls hold their heat and texture. The ceiling mediates smoke and light. The openings invite subtle change without chaos. This is the quiet choreography of life indoors. Everything connected, everything purposeful. The house is alive in a slow, patient way, and as you breathe, you realize that windows, doors, and shutters are not conveniences. They are instruments of survival. They allow the home to participate in the day and night cycles. They let warmth accumulate. They let cold remind you of your dependence. They maintain boundaries and mediate endurance. Even a simple opening teaches patience. Even a modest door instructs you on the fragility of comfort. Life inside these walls is never static. It is slow, measured, persistent. You return to the center of the room. Look around. The fire, the walls, the ceiling, the openings, all together form a system of living, a single modest home containing the sum of light, warmth, air, and endurance. And you understand something quiet but essential. Medieval survival was not only in the material, but in attentiveness to subtle shifts in the environment, and the small, persistent negotiations that allowed life to continue through cold nights and dim mornings. You sit near the hearth. The room feels full of careful balance, warmth from fire and bodies, cold from openings and walls, smoke hurling gently above, light creeping through cracks. The house exists in layers. It mediates life with slow, patient consistency, and for anyone inhabiting it, endurance becomes intuitive. Every breath, every movement, every adjustment matters. The room, the roof, the walls, the openings, they all speak quietly to those who listen. And if you remain still long enough, you begin to understand their language. It is subtle, unhurried, and absolute. It is survival rendered in soft wood, straw, clay, and smoke. Your gaze drops from windows and beams to the floor. The earth lies beneath you, packed firm by decades of footsteps. It is uneven, slightly concave in places where repeated movement has worn it down, raised ridges where straw mats, beds, or benches have rested for years. Even here, imperfections are not accidental. They record history quietly, the flow of daily life etched into packed soil. This is the foundation of endurance. You feel it beneath your bare feet or thin-soled shoes. The coolness presses gently against the soles. It is persistent, slow, unchanging in its own way. You could walk across the room many times and feel the subtle variations, a small depression here, a ridge there. The floor tells you how to move, where to step lightly, where the straw has shifted, where the fire's heat reaches. Straw is scattered across much of the floor. It absorbs dirt, ash, and moisture. It insulates, it cushions. It marks boundaries, a layer for sleeping, a line for work, a pile for sweeping later. You bend slightly, brushing your hand across it. Dust rises slowly, suspended in the dim light. You inhale a faint scent. Earth, straw, smoke, and age. The floor is rarely swept completely clean. Every day, dirt accumulates. Ash drifts from the hearth. Straw fragments separate from mattresses and mats. Each step redistributes them. A living system of modest cleanliness and slow decay. You notice how your own movement contributes to it. Even small shifts send dust into the air. Even rearranging a blanket changes the subtle map of straw and soil. You kneel slowly, feeling the unevenness beneath your knees. The texture of the packed earth is coarse, firm. It does not yield easily, and yet it absorbs the pressure of your weight, gradually, silently. You adjust slightly, feeling ridges and soft depressions. The floor is intimate in its resistance. It requires attention without complaint. A broom made of bound twigs rests nearby. Its motion will guide straw and dust back toward the hearth, not for cleanliness alone, but to preserve warmth, to clear space, to manage the home's subtle microclimate. Sweeping is slow work, a ritual almost. It begins in one corner, moving gradually across the room. Each stroke displaces dust and straw, softening the air as it shifts. The straw itself has history. It may be from last season's harvest. It may be gathered from multiple sources. It insulates against cold, absorbs spills, and cushions sleeping bodies. It is coarse in texture, often mixed with bits of hay or dried grass. You press it between your fingers, not soft, like modern bedding. Rough, fibrous, persistent, yet functional. If you lie down on it, you feel its uneven layering. Some areas compacted from repeated use. Some areas loose, fresh from sweeping. You shift slowly to distribute weight. Your body molds gradually to the irregularity. Every movement creates subtle changes. The floor remembers. Dust hovers faintly in the light from the hearth or window. It is never absent. It moves with the air, curling around feet and furniture. You notice how it settles in corners first, along walls, beneath low benches. It is a quiet companion to your work and rest. And yet, the floor is not passive. It transmits temperature, moisture, and vibration. You feel cold more keenly near edges. You feel warmth near the fire. Footfalls from others resonate subtly through the earth. The room's rhythm is maintained through this contact. Even dust participates in life, responding to movement in air. You imagine a child crawling across the straw, a person kneeling to prepare food, another rising from bed. Each movement shifts layers, redistributes warmth, stirs particles into the air. The floor is not inert. It is active, negotiating with every action. Sweeping, adjusting straw, arranging bedding, all these actions maintain continuity. The home's endurance relies on the constant attention to this ground layer. Neglect leads to discomfort. Layers must be managed. Small shifts have cumulative effects. Cold may gather, dust may concentrate, straw may compact unevenly. You rise slowly, step lightly across uneven earth. Sense the differences beneath each foot, a ridge here, a hollow there. The floor communicates if you listen. Its guidance is subtle, slow, and essential. And you notice a quiet fact: survival here is never separated from the earth. You inhabit it fully. It supports you, resists you, and shapes your daily life. It is more than just a surface. It is part of a system that mediates warmth, sound, dust, and endurance. The ground beneath you holds every past step. It absorbs weight, redistributes pressure, collects straw and ash. It allows heat to gather near fire, coolness to linger near walls. Every element of the room, ceiling, walls, fire, bedding, openings, interacts through this foundation, and you, walking, kneeling, or resting, are part of its rhythm. Life is slow, measured, persistent. Even in a single room, survival is a dialogue with floors, straw, and the air above. You pause, feeling the small, persistent dust motes rise with your movement. Breathing slowly, you allow your awareness to merge with the room's quiet, layered life. And as you stand, you realize that the earth beneath is not simply ground. It is participant, mediator, recorder, a witness to every season, every night, every fire. It holds the accumulated effort of centuries. And through it you understand the deliberate, persistent rhythm of medieval domestic life. You return your attention to the hearth. It sits low in the room, close to the center, not raised, not ornamental, just functional, a simple pit lined with stones, blackened by decades of smoke and heat. The fire within is small now, embers glowing faintly, breathing gently with the draft. The hearth is the anchor of the home, not only for warmth, but for life itself. Meals begin here, water heats here, clothes may be dried nearby, and smoke rises steadily, curling toward the ceiling, interacting with beams and walls as it does so. You kneel carefully, tending the fire. You push a small ember aside, add a splinter of wood. It hisses softly as it catches. A small flame rises, flickering in rhythm with your movements. The air immediately warms near your hands. Elsewhere the room remains cool, gradients forming from fire to wall, from floor to ceiling. Smoke rises in gentle spirals, curling lazily through darkened rafters. It is never constant. It bends with drafts from windows, cracks in the walls and gaps in the door. You notice the movement. It teaches patience. It is subtle guidance. Stir slowly. Breathe deliberately. Do not rush. Meals are prepared with quiet repetition. A pot of water warms slowly. Grains may simmer for hours. Bread is kneaded, shaped, and left near embers to rise. Every action is deliberate. No abrupt gestures. No unnecessary strain. Every movement conserves heat, effort, and time. The firelight reflects off walls unevenly. Shadows shift as you move. Smoke softens edges, muffles sounds, and spreads warmth in irregular patterns. You adjust your posture to avoid excessive inhalation. Breathing becomes conscious, controlled, harmonious with the environment. Children may stir nearby. A small cough, a shift of blankets. Even this is part of the rhythm. The fire responds indirectly. More warmth is needed. You feed it gently. It grows steadily, not dramatically, not explosively. It is measured endurance, not spectacle. Daily rituals at the hearth are long. Water must reach a boil. Food must simmer sufficiently. Embers require periodic coaxing. Each task is slow, deliberate, and repeated. The work is unhurried, yet essential. Mistakes are costly in comfort, though rarely catastrophic. Smoke stains accumulate on beams and walls over time. They serve a practical function, coating surfaces to repel moisture. They mark the passage of days, seasons, and years. You notice the gray residue on the ceiling beams, the dark patina on timbers, and the layered ash around the hearth. These are records of survival, invisible to outsiders, essential to inhabitants. At intervals, the broom comes into play. Ash is swept gently toward the hearth, straw is adjusted, and dust is redistributed to prevent cold pockets. These small motions maintain balance. They mediate temperature, air quality, and overall comfort. The hearth is the center of these interactions. Evenings bring repetition of the ritual in reverse. Meals finished, embers banked, smoke curling higher, the room preparing for the slow descent into night. Heat gathers low, cold presses at the walls, smoke softens the upper reaches of the room. Your body learns this rhythm. Breathing slows. Movements are deliberate, unhurried, minimal. You pause to observe the subtle communication between fire and house. Embers radiate warmth. Smoke rises, softening sound and light. Walls retain heat unevenly. Ceiling mediates, moderates. Floor absorbs and transmits. Altogether, they form a living system of quiet endurance. Even small deviations are noticed. A sudden movement might dislodge dust. A draft could alter smoke flow. A neglected ember might die too quickly. Attention is constant, even in stillness. Survival is in the balance, maintained by repetitive, measured actions. And in all this you sense something profound. The hearth is not merely functional. It is a mediator of life, a teacher of patience, and a keeper of rhythm. Its presence dictates movement, posture, breath, and attention. It shapes the experience of the entire room, of every layer within it, from floor to ceiling. You settle near the hearth. The warmth spreads gradually. Smoke rises in gentle spirals. Light flickers over the walls. The floor beneath your feet is firm yet yielding. The ceiling above watches, mediates, absorbs, and the door and window edges pulse subtly with the outside world. Here, within the low, slow glow, you understand the meticulous intimacy of medieval life. Every moment, every motion, every breath is quietly attuned to the environment. The room is alive, not in movement, but in layered interaction. Endurance, patience, and awareness converge around the hearth, and you feel the rhythm of centuries echo in these repeated motions. Meals, embers, ash, straw, smoke. Each element participates in a slow choreography of survival. Nothing is hurried, nothing is absent. Everything is accounted for in subtle balance. The hearth, once prepared, will provide warmth for hours. Smoke will curl to the ceiling and dissipate slowly. Ash will remain until swept. Straw will shift underfoot, and the room will continue to breathe, mediating heat, light, sound, and air. You, like the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and the fire, become part of this quiet endurance. Now your attention shifts to the chests, cupboards, and small alcoves along the walls. They are simple, practical, solid. Wooden boxes reinforced with iron bands, sometimes marked by faint carvings. The lids are heavy, designed to protect possessions from curious hands, small animals, and dust. They are not ornate, but they are enduring. Inside each chest lies accumulation, not abundance, but continuity. Clothing folded carefully, woolen layers patched repeatedly, tools, blades, and utensils arranged in rough order, their surfaces darkened with use. Bits of string or rope, perhaps a small token, a candle stub. Every item bears history. Every scratch, dent, and stain tells a story of survival, labor, and care. You kneel before a chest, lift the lid carefully, mindful of hinges that creak gently. A faint scent rises, dried wool, old wood, faint smoke. The interior is shadowed. You reach inside slowly, feeling for the edges of folded garments or small objects. Every motion is deliberate, measured, purposeful. You notice how storage shapes movement. A pot may sit near a chest for easy access. A broom leans nearby. Straw around the base cushions against shifting weight. The room becomes a choreography of function. Objects define pathways. They guide the body's motion. They impose a rhythm of interaction. Some chests are personal, others shared. One might hold a child's clothing. Another contains utensils for cooking. Another, perhaps, keeps seasonal garments, stored carefully against moths or damp. Each chest is a participant in life, not merely furniture, a mediator of endurance. The chest's lid is a slow hinge between access and protection. Open, it invites activity, encourages interaction. Closed, it shields, maintaining order in the room's layered system of warmth, dust, and movement. Objects inside are preserved, patiently waiting for their moment of use. You run your hands along the surfaces, rough, worn, smooth in areas polished by frequent contact. The wood remembers each interaction, echoing centuries of similar gestures. Each household has this quiet continuity. Items move in cycles, used, cleaned, repaired, stored again. The process is slow, intentional, necessary for survival. Above the chests, the walls may hold pegs, hooks for hanging tools, small baskets or clothing. Every object has its place, chosen not for display, but for function. Space is finite, so every item's location is deliberate. The arrangement is a subtle map of daily life. You reach for a small wooden box within the chest. Inside are threads, needles, and scraps of fabric. They speak of repairs, small, steady, continuous labor to extend the life of garments and household items. The work is quiet, repetitive, necessary. You imagine someone, decades ago, hunched near the hearth performing these same motions, threading, stitching, folding, an echo of rhythm in the household, persisting across generations. Other objects are heavier, cooking implements, iron tools, ceramic jugs, They require both space and care, stored thoughtfully to avoid tipping, scratching, or interference with daily movement. Even weight distribution is part of enduring function. You notice how dust settles inside chests. It is never fully absent, but the design allows minimal accumulation on essential items. A gentle sweep may remove excess. Attention preserves utility. Neglect compromises endurance. The persistence of these objects reinforces the continuity of the home. Nothing is frivolous, everything serves survival. Even small, seemingly insignificant items participate in the household's rhythm. The chest contains both physical objects and the cumulative effort of centuries of careful living. You sit quietly before one, observing the shadows cast by the lid and the surrounding walls. Sunlight or firelight falls unevenly, highlighting textures. The interplay of light and shadow accentuates the surface of folded wool, rough wood, and iron bands. The room feels ordered yet organic. Nothing is forced. Everything is integrated into a slow, enduring pattern. You pause, imagining the repetition of this attention. Each day, each week, each season involves similar actions: retrieving, replacing, adjusting. The house becomes a living system of objects and gestures, and within that system endurance is practiced and preserved. Finally, you rise slowly, leaving the chest closed. The objects within remain patient, waiting. The room continues its quiet rhythm: warmth near the hearth, cold near the walls, smoke curling upward, dust settling slowly, straw cushioning movement. Every element from floor to ceiling, from hearth to chest, participates in a slow choreography of life. You understand now that medieval survival was never only about shelter or food. It was about interaction with all elements of the home: the air, the smoke, the warmth, the cold, the objects, the surfaces, and the movements they demand. Patience and attention were as essential as wood and clay, and every chest, every pot, every scrap of straw was a participant in endurance. The house itself, through floors, walls, ceilings, openings, and storage, becomes a teacher of rhythm. It teaches subtle awareness, deliberate motion, quiet patience. The persistence of objects mirrors the persistence of life, and as you leave, the chest closed, the room holds its balance again. The fire glows steadily. Smoke rises lazily. Smoke rises lazily. Dust remains suspended. The floor bears weight. Walls retain warmth. The ceiling mediates light. The hearth radiates life. And the objects wait patiently for the next interaction, for the next breath of endurance. You sit in the center of the room one last time, allowing your eyes to move slowly across every surface you have observed. The walls, rough with wattle and daub, hold warmth unevenly but patiently. Their imperfections are not flaws but records of care, use, and quiet endurance. Beams overhead stretch across the ceiling, darkened by smoke, creaking gently as the air shifts. Above them, thatch and timber mediate cold wind and moisture with a calm consistency that has endured through countless seasons. Beneath you, the packed earth floor supports every step. Straw cushions, shifts, and absorbs, moving slowly with each motion. Dust and ash swirl and settle again, imperceptible to the hurried eye, yet constant and present. You notice how even the smallest gesture, rearranging a blanket, pushing an ember, slightly alters the flow of warmth, air, and particles in this quiet ecosystem. The hearth, now glowing low, radiates life. Smoke curls upward in slow spirals, carrying warmth and softening light. It disperses sound, and it reminds you to breathe slowly, to move deliberately. You imagine someone centuries ago performing the same motions, tending fire, stirring a pot, shifting straw, interacting with the room's persistent rhythm. The same air currents, the same layering of warmth and cold, the same balance of survival and comfort. The chests along the walls keep their quiet secrets. Garments folded carefully, tools arranged patiently, tokens of human continuity preserved under lids that creak slowly on iron hinges. Even these objects, modest as they are, participate in endurance. They teach careful attention. They anchor memory and habit. They mark a household's rhythm across days, weeks, and years. Every opening the window, the door, the small gaps around shutters negotiates with the outside world. Cold air seeps in subtly. Light enters in measured amounts. Every shift matters. Even the smallest draft influences warmth, smoke, and perception. The room is never isolated. It is a quiet conversation between inside and outside, between human and environment. You allow yourself a moment to simply notice. Breathe in sync with the curling smoke. Feel the uneven warmth of the floor beneath straw and your own weight. Let your eyes follow shadows dancing slowly across walls and beams. Notice the faint textures in the clay and straw. Hear the soft creak of the ceiling as it adjusts to air and weight. Medieval homes were never luxurious. They were rarely neat by modern standards. And yet, in their simplicity, there is profound instruction. Patience is built into the very structure. Attention is rewarded. Small adjustments carry weight. Endurance is the language of daily life. The room's layers are inseparable. Floor and straw, walls and timber, hearth and smoke, chests and objects, window and door, all interact quietly. A disturbance in one part reverberates subtly elsewhere. Warmth shifts, air moves, dust rises. You feel it in the soles of your feet, in the brush of your sleeve against the wall, in the careful inhalation of smoke. Everything is connected in a calm, deliberate system. As the evening deepens, you notice the slow dimming of light. The fire becomes the dominant source, flickering and breathing in rhythm with the room. Shadows lengthen, corners soften, and the house settles further into its patient, enduring state. You imagine those who slept here, waking and working with the same patterns, the same rhythms, the same attention to subtle shifts. It is impossible to separate survival from the act of inhabiting. Every breath, every shift, every careful movement is part of maintaining balance. Even the smallest object contributes. Threads, tools, chests, straw, ash. Every surface remembers. Every layer interacts. Every breath counts. And you understand quietly that comfort in this home is not a single sensation. It is cumulative. It is awareness. It is the slow adjustment to warmth and cold, to smoke and air, to light and shadow, to texture and weight. It is the subtle negotiation between human and environment that has persisted for centuries. You lean back slightly, feeling warmth gather in your lower body, while cool air lingers near the walls. Your eyes rest on the timber beams, the wattle and daub, the scattered straw, the quiet chests. Each element contributes to the household's persistent rhythm. Nothing is extravagant, nothing is abrupt. Everything is measured, deliberate, patient. And as you exhale slowly, you sense that this is the essence of domestic endurance, not in sudden events, not in moments of drama, but in quiet, persistent attention, in interaction with every layer of the home, every object, every subtle change in light, heat, and air. The house itself becomes a teacher. It instructs through texture, temperature, and rhythm. It rewards patience, it insists on attention. It endures because humans endure alongside it, and you, now part of this quiet observation, participate in that continuity. You allow your gaze to soften, noticing the room as a whole, fire at the center, smoke curling above, straw cushioning feet and bedding, walls that breathe with the air, ceiling beams that creak gently, objects in chests and on pegs, waiting, windows and doors negotiating with the outside. All of it together is simple yet profound, a single modest space that mediates warmth, cold, air, dust, light, and human presence. A space that teaches endurance, patience, and subtle attention. A home where survival and life are inseparable. As your attention drifts slowly, you notice how all rhythms converge. The room inhales and exhales with smoke, air, and warmth. You align your breath, your posture, and your awareness with that rhythm. There is nothing urgent here, nothing demanding, only persistence, only quiet observation, only endurance practiced through subtle interaction. You rest finally, allowing the patterns of the home to settle around you. Shadows stretch and compress. Dust drifts lazily. Straw cushions shift imperceptibly. Smoke rises and softens the room's edges. Light dims and deepens in a gentle cycle, and the house holds all of it patiently, without need for ceremony, without distraction. You notice one last time the subtle wisdom of this space. It is a record of human attention, a chronicle of quiet survival, a rhythm learned and repeated across centuries. Walls, floors, ceilings, openings, hearth, and objects, all teaching endurance, all guiding movement, all preserving life in a slow, deliberate choreography. And as the fire burns low and smoke rises to meet the darkened ceiling, you feel the quiet release of presence, not triumph, not drama, but completion. A gentle alignment with time, space, and survival. The house breathes around you, and you, for a moment, breathe in tandem. This is what medieval homes were really like inside. Not perfect, not luxurious, not abrupt, but complete in their attention to endurance. And if you leave now, or drift in slumber, the house will continue, as it always has, quietly mediating life, sustaining warmth, and preserving the persistent rhythm of domestic survival.